And yeah.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, we are being recorded. We're live. Yeah, wonderful to see you all. Our goal for today, Gautam and I was talking just 2 days ago, how these kinds of conversations are most fun when they're as interactive as possible. So while Gautam and I will initially just warm up the conversation, we hope that everybody will participate. And whether that's through the chat, which I'll be monitoring regularly, or by coming off mute to hop in when you have something that you'd like to jump in. Please do. In the meantime, though, when you aren't speaking, if you would mute yourself, that'd be great, so that we're, just not cross-talking over each other. And to kick things off, if you would, please drop in the chat where you're calling in from, and if you are drinking a type of tea, what you're drinking. I'm drinking one of Gautam's Darjeeling Autumnals from the Suvarna Small Farmers Society. He'll talk about later. And enjoying it on a good Sunday. So today is a big day for many reasons. First of all, it is the equinox. So happy equilibrium day, everybody. Today, the amount of sun matches the amount of nighttime, daytime matches nighttime. And I think there's some trick you can do with eggs, like balancing eggs. I've heard about this. I've never really figured it out, but if anybody knows it, let us know how you do it. Something about it, you can do it on a spoon. But anyway, it's an equinox, which is a big festival in many cultures. So for those of you who celebrate the Persian tradition of New Year, Nowruz, happy Nowruz to you all. We're a little late here. It was Holi last week, the festival of colors and of springtime. So it is a beautiful moment in the circle around the sun. And even if we're just celebrating this very moment and today, happy Sunday to everybody. Glad to be able to share with you. Mohan, Gautam is going to be speaking about the work that they do at TPI that really spans the entire Indian subcontinent, from Darjeeling to Dwars to Assam to the Nilgiris in the south. And so this conversation is intended to provide some insight to all of us on what the on-the-ground reality is for people who are driving change. I'm going to make one bit of shameless self-promotion, and then we'll switch gears to talking with Gautam. But in honor of the equinox, we are doing a discount of 15% off everything on our site, including the teas that Gautam and his team provides. So that discount code is just Equinox, all caps. If you type it in on the website, you're please be able to stock up on whatever you'd like. Okay, so with that, let's get into talking about tea. It is an absolute honor and a privilege to be able to introduce Gautam Mohan, who is the Managing Director of Tea Promoters of India. He's been with the company for over 10 years, around 10 years, and is the third generation of his family to lead the organization. In his current role, he's responsible for overseeing tea production across India, which, as I mentioned, includes in Darjeeling, Assam, Dwars, and South India. And it's a privilege to be able to have this conversation with a tea producer with such depth and breadth of experience and such a dedicated commitment to progressive tea growing. From organic to biodynamic to regenerative practices on the environmental side to actively organizing small farmer co-ops, Gautam and his team is really involved with helping to shape a sustainable future for the Indian tea industry. And on a personal level, it's also a privilege to be able to have Gautam here, because he and his team are also helping to coach the farmers that we work with in the Kumaon region as well. And so we're very grateful for the support that everybody at TPI has played in helping that to happen. So with that, I'm going to turn off my screen share and get to the main show. So here we go. I'm going to spotlight Gautam. There we go. And turn it over. Okay, so as I said, this is intended to be a conversation, so please do feel free to use the chat. And if you have questions throughout, just come off mute and join. But we're gonna start with Gautam. If you would, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your personal story. We'll talk about TPI and sort of all the practices you do in a little bit, but first, just the context on how you got to the point in your life that you're at right now.
Sure, Raj. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. And it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. I hope I don't bore you this Sunday morning. So I'll try my best to keep our conversations deep and interesting, and hopefully something meaningful will come out from this 1 hour discussion. A little bit about me, Raj. So I have always been passionate about nature. Spent a lot of my time in the tea gardens. My grandfather was a tea manager. My father was born in Darjeeling in the tea gardens. So I've spent a ton of my childhood time in the tea garden, and it's it was like a child in a Disneyland. That's how tea gardens are. So just to give people context, like these are large spaces of land. Specifically with Darjeeling, it's up in the mountains close to the Himalayas, and you have a lot of birds, tons of animals. You have waterfalls, hiking trails, biking trails. So it was a lot of fun growing up as a child in these tea gardens, and that's where I think my real interest in coming back. I had left the country to complete my studies. So I've specialized in agriculture, and I've combined that with a master's in development, because the social impact of the work that we do for the local communities is also something that's extremely important to me. And as I said, that attraction of just growing up in these tea farms, it stayed with me, and I decided to come back 10 years ago. And yeah, it's 10 years this year that I've been a
10
part of
years.
it.
Congratulations, a decade with the organization. So I'm curious, Gautam. So I imagine that growing up sort of in the tea world, a conversation that I could imagine playing out between you and your family is Gautam going to come into tea or not? I'm curious, did you consider leaving tea entirely?
Uh, well, when you're young, you have all kinds of thoughts. So
That's true.
at one point, I wanted to be a career diplomat. At another point, I wanted to work for an NGO. But my interests were largely around the area of agriculture and development. I somehow always wanted to be rooted to the earth and its people. So when the mind starts maturing after a certain age, you realize that what you already have in these tea gardens is fragile ecosystems, and these vulnerable communities that are wholly and largely dependent on you.
Yeah.
Each tea garden is the size of 20-30 football fields, almost 150 to 200 hectares. They have several villages inside them, water bodies, flora, fauna, and to a huge degree, your practices and your values determine the future livelihoods of these people and the nature around us. So
Yeah.
yes.
And can you then tell us about those values and what is that underlies your approach and TPI's approach?
So Raj, we've always been focused on natural farming. Earlier when my grandfather was working in the farms, his approach was always that we'll we'll stay close to the core of nature. Uh, and now, yeah, we've coined it as organic farming, or regenerative farming. But that's really been the core at the heart of Tea Promoters India. That's been our value, that in all these different geographies where we work, the one strong value that we have is that we only grow and harvest organic tea. And that's where to supplement and to really complement the value of preserving nature and all that's around you, especially the soil. We realized that you will also have to take the local communities with you. So that's where our strong values on fair trade also really started giving shape, and that was largely brought about by my father, because he was part of the generation that lived post India's independence. And the initial years of independence, our country went through a lot of turmoil, both in terms of the levels of unemployment, poverty, rural to urban migration. So you just couldn't ignore the social impact that we could create in these regions where we work in.
Gosh, you've opened up so many doors for conversation already. But will you tell us the role that TPI played with fair trade in the early days as an example?
Sure. So one of the ways in which we believe that we should be managing our tea gardens was through a more participatory approach. These were structures that were deeply rooted with their own colonial history and legacies. So the approach, the management style in a tea garden was very, very top down. So you had a manager, and then below him you had his subordinates, which were called assistant managers, and below them you had supervisory staff, and then 6, 7 layers down the line you had the tea plucker, and that just wouldn't work in an organic system where you really needed that bottom up feedback on what's happening on the ground. So we broke down these structures, and we created what now has been called a joint body. We earlier called it the managing committee. So you would have the trained garden manager who sort of understood agriculture more from a theoretical sense. But then you would also have women representatives. Let's not forget most tea pluckers are women. So you would have a female voice on the committee. You would have the local school teacher, the local village head, and it was just a little more inclusive, that addressed the various stakeholders that live in these regions. And fair trade, the German organization FLO, they visited us in one of our gardens in Darjeeling to study this democratic structure and this participatory decision making. And that's how they then in their standards incorporated these structures as part of the fair trade certification process, that every tea garden would then have to have these decentralized structures if they wanted to be fair trade certified.
Wow. So
that's
fair trade came, and the FLO kind of European equivalent studied the practices at a tea promoter's garden and then helped to shape their standards based on what they saw there. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so when was that? Do you remember?
This was in 1992.
Okay.
If I'm mistaken. So yeah, a while back.
While. Yeah, wonderful. And actually, if we can just step even further back, can you tell us the history of TPI?
Yeah. So Raj, there's a pre-independence phase, which was with my grandfather being one of the few Indians who was left in this part of the country, largely this northeast region of India, Darjeeling and Assam, when the British left. And he was always known as a community leader. So he was invited by many of these local communities who now had abandoned tea gardens with the British leaving them. And that's when our journey of tea promoters really started. So he started creating these managing committees, and through this democratic way he started running the gardens, with the core being we'll stick to natural farming. We're not going to spray any pesticides, we're not going to apply any synthetic fertilizers, and that's where the whole philosophy grew. Now, while we were doing a considerable amount of work within these tea gardens, there was also life around it. So you had scattered small farmer groups, and these are extremely remote mountainous communities. So that's where the second generation, who was my father, his vision really was that how do you also now instead of creating this island of paradise in a sea of deprivation, how do you now further integrate this value, this philosophy of community-based farming, the natural way, with the wider community. So we started engaging with in the second generation. My father started engaging with these small farmer groups, and in tea, unlike in coffee, cocoa, bananas, you never really had a strong cooperative movement. And it really had its origins here in Tea Promoters India, where we worked with some of these groups, convinced them that growing tea is a good idea, unlike the cash crops that were really seasonal and high risk. We convince them that tea gives you a weekly harvest, which means it's a stable weekly income, and it's a hardy plant. Farmers are always very suspicious of an outsider coming and telling them what to do, but they also flock like sheep. So when it worked for one small farmer group, then everyone wanted to work with us and create these cooperatives in order to function. So that's really been an evolution over the past few years. And now my job is to manage what we have, and then to again go a lot more deeper and continuously question what we are doing and why we're doing.
Yes, wonderful. Okay, and people are dropping some questions into the chat, so I'll share those. One is around the role of the Green Revolution in the 60s and 70s, which seems to be maybe happening the same time that your grandfather was really getting involved in launching a natural system approach. I'm curious how did those two interact, and to what degree was there resistance or skepticism or outright barriers that were put in place to introducing those kinds of organic practices early in the...
That's such a great question. He's actually written plenty on this subject, because while the entire country was as you mentioned, witnessing this green revolution of synthetic fertilizers, urea, phosphatic fertilizers, he here was telling the farmers a different story. And when you really look at a tea garden setup, and this is what he always believed, we live with the natural systems so closely in a tea garden, so even now in most tea gardens, you survive on the local spring water for your drinking needs and your domestic purpose needs. So if you were to contaminate that, you would be drinking water. If you had to contaminate that with pesticide or through some runoff, you would be, and that's how fragile these communities are. And then apart from just the tea, there are forests within tea gardens. There are animals living there. There are these are extremely fragile ecosystems. You have very I would say a very diverse set of both plant species and bird species. So how do you protect the flora and fauna around you, because that again is so it's so critical for that ecological balance to you mentioned the equilibrium, right? For the equilibrium to take place, where every pest has a predator, and it's often when you spray these chemicals, be it a weedicide or a herbicide, that you disbalance the pest versus a predator ratio. And that's when all the trouble starts. So these were his very core beliefs, and there was a lot of resistance, especially since organic farming is slow. Inherently it's slow. Your yields are lower, but the long-term effects are you have better soil, you have less pests, and you have a largely non-contaminated environment.
Yes, wonderful. And I've heard from many tea makers that there is a bit of a trade-off that one makes in switching to organic, in that, as you're saying, the yield comes down. So from the sort of economics of keeping the whole thing running, there's a little bit less tea to work with compared to traditional conventional, but hopefully the price premium, being able to offer it as organic and therefore a slightly higher rate, hopefully offsets that. And I'm curious if you can speak to a little bit of like the economics of trying to operate a garden and the organic perspective in it. Did that make sense?
Yeah,
That's a clear question.
No, absolutely. It's not cheap to follow a strong organic philosophy, Raj. It's often backbreaking work. So, for example, if you have a situation where your fields are covered with weeds, you have to like with both your hands, undertake hand weeding. You can't just herbicide and remove all the weeds. And this is where uh, you know our generation, the generation that's coming out now, is not willing to do such back-breaking work. So how do you mechanize some of this? How do you explain to people the rationale behind why we're not spraying a herbicide? Has been a challenge. But then with that challenge comes also the costs.
Yeah.
Which you're referring to, because this is labor intensive. You not only have less labor, but it's also wholly expensive these days, even in India. So to really answer that well, I think there's a combination of factors that still support this idea of farming organically. So one is the market. Absolutely, I think with tea, the entire idea that you can't wash away tea before consuming it. So say if you bought a bag of tomatoes, right? You could wash down the tomatoes before consuming it, but with tea, you're literally drinking that chemical concoction. So I think that really resonates with the end consumer. So we have always seen a very stable and strong demand for organic tea. And this is absolutely been supported by the West.
Gotcha.
The entire philosophy and the entire consumer awareness for organic labels in India is growing, but I wouldn't say it's as mature as what you would see in Western Europe or even in North America.
Gotcha.
So one is the favorable market conditions and the consumer demand, but secondly, I also very strongly feel that in the longer run, there is a point where your cultivation practices in organic create an environment where you literally have that equilibrium that I had mentioned earlier, which then creates a situation where you have such a harmonious balance of a completely pest-free farm. And this does sound utopian, but we have seen it now being organic for the last 30 years. We literally have no pests in our farm, right?
Wonderful.
And that's a huge saving in terms of the amount a conventional farm would spray in terms of chemicals and other synthetic products, which are often very.
Yeah. No, sorry. Well, this is a great. Dozer's asked a question as well. Curious to know how prevalent is pesticide and insecticide use in non-organic tea plantations?
Great question again. Extremely prevalent. The last time I checked, tea has more than 150 odd, sucking pests and diseases that inflict considerable damage to the crop. So yes, not only insecticides, you also have weedicides that are sprayed in tea plantations. There was a big issue with tea coming in, I think, from Sri Lanka, which had glyphosate for a long time, for many years, and it was difficult for the country to bring that under control to the extreme point where then they decided to go completely organic, realizing the damage glyphosate did to the human kidney and overall the human health.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's rampant in tea gardens that are not following the natural way of farming.
Great. And yeah, well, thank you for that. It's, I'm sure, a tricky thing to navigate sort of the introduction of those practices in a way that matches not only sort of the natural rhythms, but also the quality of the tea that you also need to make. And so, yeah, I've long appreciated from all the teas that we've ever had from TPI that the quality of the tea is phenomenal. And I guess I've attributed that to the organic practices and sort of the context of the community involvement that helps to give rise to it. But it's also interesting to think about the sort of balance that you must have to employ with that and just the technical aspects of making tea. So I guess there's a little bit of a segue. We've talked about organic so far, but I'm curious if you can also speak to, right now there's a lot of energy around the idea of a regenerative movement. And so I'm curious if you can speak from your perspective, what does regenerative agriculture mean, and how are the practices that you're introducing with TPI representative of those values?
Absolutely, Raj. So, organic can also just be a certificate where you really don't believe in value, but you still have the certificate. So what many farmers can also do is replace synthetic fertilizer with a natural fertilizer, but still follow the principles of NPK, which is nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate. Regenerative takes it a step further. Where the core philosophy is the soil, and that's where I would say our success lies. We've always focused just on the soil, and our regenerative approaches have really focused on simple aspects of soil conservation and preservation. So these are some of these places where we work. These are extremely steep and hilly terrain. So topsoil erosion is very common during the heavy Indian monsoons. We spend a great deal of effort, time, and money on creating staggered drains so that the flow of water when it's raining is broken. We also create bamboo frames to support loose soil wherever we see that there is a chance of landslide. So it's these small incremental approaches that eventually preserve your soil. A big area that we're personally focusing on now, and I'm extremely excited about it, is creating small water bodies around our tea gardens. So there are multiple objectives behind this. So the first objective is that how can we replenish the water table beneath the soil through seepage water. Number one. Number two is how can we enhance the flora and the fauna by having these staggered water bodies around the farm. It attracts more birds. Those birds eat the pests that are coming and destroying our crops. And how do you create that equibalance? And third is I think we all are witnessing a change in our weather patterns. So can I create a microclimatic condition where if say there is a drought, can my own microclimatic weather pattern through all this water keep the moisture levels intact at a level that tea needs it?
Wow. I'm curious how much science is involved in that versus sort of practice and just kind of wisdom of farming. Is there a lot of instrumentation that you introduce to look at those kinds of things, or is it an experience-based approach?
So for creating these seepage water tanks and water bodies, we actually got in touch with this local tribe that has been doing this for generations.
Yeah.
And they have a very scientific approach to it. It'll be difficult to explain to the audience without showing them pictures, the design, and their thought process. Of course, we have moisture meters, studying the now and then difference of having these water tables. But then ultimately a farmer needs water, right? And these are regions where irrigation is not possible because you barely are drinking water. So then water conservation, with the vagaries that we are seeing in the weather patterns, becomes ever so important, not only from keeping the tea plants alive, but also for the local communities. Water is the biggest crisis today, I would say, our country is facing. And clean water, too. So
okay, excellent. Well, I think the conversation's warmed up. David, thank you for waiting. David Galley, calling in from Portland, my teacher in Puertes.
Hi, everybody.
Come up and
this is
share.
Really, really cool. Thanks to you both. And hi, Alicia. I guess you kind of answered parts of my questions already, but I was also really curious about like the background knowledge forming of like, especially how people previous to you in your, family tea tree sort of figured these things out. And also how they convinced other people. Forgive me if I've got the timeline wrong, but it sounds like they were already convincing tea farmers that it was good to essentially stay with their pre-organic distinction practices, if you know what I mean. Because like before the Green Revolution, there wasn't organic versus conventional. It was just organic. So then when that came in, so many people were getting excited about it and the potential of it. And it was pretty early in terms of being able to have seen the negative consequences of it. So it seems like it would have been a real kind of like uphill struggle to convince people that there was going to be a downside to conventional farming if they hadn't actually seen that in practice yet. So like what you said about drawing on the local, it sounds like indigenous people's understanding of how to make these things work, better than, probably a lot better than what was the practice of the day, which I assume is probably coming from the British. And then also, well, that's kind of a lot of question. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thanks, David. That's a great question again. So that there was conventional farming happening all around us, and you could really see the, call me biased, but you could really see the negative effects of it. Not just from a contamination of our environment, of our soils and water bodies, but also from from a more health perspective. You had workers dealing with these chemicals in a very unscientific, back then, in a very hazardous way. There were all kinds of injuries. You also had, I remember, in the late 80s in India, you had a spate of farmer suicides in India, and more often than not, it would entail huge loans that they would take to buy these expensive chemicals from these companies. And if there was a drought or if the markets were down, you would always read this cycle where they would consume the chemical and commit suicide. So I think some of this thing was also it was quite easy. People themselves saw it. A little bit of capacity building was also required, on the ramifications of all of this towards human health and our soils and water.
Yeah. Thanks. And I'm seeing Nishchal is also here from Nepal Tea, another leader, part of a family of leaders of organic movements just across the border from Darjeeling. Nish, great to have you here. I'm curious, do you have any thoughts or questions that you want to put into the conversation?
Hi, hi Gautam. Very nice to meet you, and thanks, Raj, for organizing this. It's just it is so impressive to hear so many similarities in terms of what Gautam's previous generations have done and what our previous generation, my father, has done in the I was just kind of imagining every single thing that you were talking about from the perspective of our origin, and it just was, I was literally imagining the gardens and the just everything that you were saying. So I can totally relate to that. I think one of the great things is what we have seen, or what especially in Nepal, what we have seen is people are really starting to understand the value that organic teas, or not just having pesticides or chemicals and all of these in their tea farms, how it can add value. And I was really, I could totally relate to the pricing and all of these other movements that are going on, which is really empowering the farmers, kind of making it's on us to kind of show them that this has a lot more value than conventional farming. And I think it has been a great success that a lot more farmers, every single year we see a lot more farmers trying to get to the organic movement. But one of the biggest challenges again is those most of the farmers or gardens are committing to some of these practices, they still can't have the certifications that they need for exports, or kind of like the European standards or whatever, just because of lack of financial situation. So I'm kind of curious in terms of understanding, how do we balance that, or is there something that the government helps, or TPI does it itself to kind of promote these farmers to get those certifications financially? Because we have some ideas, and I know Raj and I kind of like talked about it very early on as well, but we have some ideas. I think we just need a bigger or more practical advice on how can this burden of financials for the farmers can be relieved to some extent. If there's any ideas, that would be fantastic.
And perfect. Thank you, Nish. It's almost like you read the playbook. I was asking Gautam if you would also speak to just generally the way you view certification's role in this whole picture. And then also if you can touch on, Nish's question on the financial burden that it introduces for farmers.
I mean, if you spoke to any producer, they would tell you that they hate certifications, right? But I understand the importance of it. When we hear from companies that sell our teas, that there is this huge wave of supermarkets, and you need a label, you need that legitimacy, so on and so forth, right? So yeah, how do you, just coming back to Nishal's question, how do you convince the farmers to maintain the documentation, maintain a certain structure that certifiers want, and also be open to audits, right? And all of this is important in today's world. I think where our certifications and the entire system of certification, where it's going wrong is that the standards, be it inorganic or fair trade, have become way too socialist. So every aspect of life, of conduct, where someone should wash their clothes, how they should wash it, what should be the water quality, everything is written down as standards. And I think that's almost that almost to me feels like a new form of neo colonialism, where there's someone sitting in a more developed world deciding how people in often in these highly diverse, rich, yet remote places should live their lives, and I think that's where a little more of context specific approaches will work. Now how do you make it context specific and relevant to say a farmer in Darjeeling vis-a-vis a farmer in southern India vis-a-vis a tea farmer in Kenya, right? I think the answer to that is that the entire certification process needs to be a lot more robust in terms of giving greater powers to the auditor. So the auditors who come have never really experienced farm life. Number one, the analyst who's reviewing your certificate and the audit results has never been to a rural setting. Number two, and more often than not, it's as I said, it's these long checklists that they have to tick mark yes or no, and there is much to life more than a yes and no. There is an in between. So I think that's where more and more, I would like to see certificates look at, at least country-wise standards. So, like, say the cost of living here is very different from the cost of living in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is maybe 10 years ahead in terms of their purchasing power parity than Darjeeling. So it would be good to have two separate standards for these two nations, for example. So let's make it country specific, and there should be greater peer review form of audits, where you have farmers auditing each other, under a strict set of values and guidelines that we all should abide by. These are just some initial thoughts that are coming to me on your certificate.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, I was just writing down as you're chatting, things that it sounds like you would offer as improvements to the way certifications are introduced, being country specific, analysis that's tied to the local context more, and peer review where producers might actually certify each other. Is that, do you see scope for technology to help with that, whether through like blockchain or through just more conversations like this where technology is reaching into places that previously were disconnected? Or is that something that go for it?
I'll give you a great example. A great example came to me right now on say one of the food safety certifications, right? And again, it's a certification that's required by most companies in the export market, where say the apron, so say when you're manufacturing the tea, you have to wear gloves, you have to wear aprons, and this certification also requires you to maintain a logbook of how many times the apron was cleaned, and also verify the water source, and it gives you like strictures on how clean the water should be, and these are in regions where people don't have enough water to drink, right? So it's all coming from from a place of good, but how do you ensure that someone sitting in Bonn, so say where Fairtrade is headquartered, really understands the context under which a farmer or a plucker lives in Assam, and the more you control these things with standards, the more you'll remain to be irrelevant or non-effective, in your approach. So it's a difficult one. How do you keep them nimble, yet effective, yet robust? I think a core part of all of this has to be your trust, in the organizations that you align with, instead of a cop versus a robber situation.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add a small little thing, Raj, if that is okay.
Please.
Yeah. So one of the other things also, and Gautam, I completely resonate with, this is like on point about the certifications and everything, just because, one of the things that we are also facing, and I'm pretty sure every rural tea community is facing, is that the standards are basically made by people in Western countries mostly, and they are to be kind of followed and kind of like done and kind of recorded and all of these things on a completely different geography, where most of our farmers, they do not know how to read and write. And just because of that poses such a big problem in terms of maintaining a lot of different things. And then I think the way we add value is just because, we kind of in a way bridge the gap and help them do all of these things. But again, like as soon as there's so many standards and so many things that they have to follow, they're not really going through their natural way of doing things in a way, right? So I completely resonate with that. One of the things I wanted to ask was, in terms of trainings and everything, I know some of the trainings that, as part of certifications and everything that we are supposed to provide to our farmers and everything, we obviously do that. Is there a way where, TP Guy or other practices where the trainings are a lot more hands-on, and which does not feel like just training for the farmers in terms of, hey, we need this for certifications, rather than more hands-on and creative ideas around training. And just, yeah, I guess, is there any interesting ideas that you've kind of like come up with?
Yeah, no, Nishal, on the training part, so we have a full-time specialized training organization that not only has a module on certifications, but also does a ton of training on, say, water and sanitation, women's health, hygiene, domestic violence. So, within that entire training course, that they cover the bit of certifications too. Why do you need to maintain a farm diary? What is the importance of documenting all of this, right? So yeah, we are working with a specialized organization, and the paperwork has just become so extensive and often complicated that we're taking outside help. And again, it also sort of re-emphasizes our own importance towards training and capacity building. I think that's the future. If you ever want to bring about any change, you really have to focus on the capacity building part of things.
Awesome. And Michael from People Co-op, thanks for joining us, Michael. He had a question. He was saying, what suggestions do you have? Well, let me read the full thing. Apropos this discussion, for buyers in the US or other Western countries, there's an ease with organic and other certifications. Customers understand them and want them, but also it's an easy shorthand. What suggestions do you have for buyers who are interested in supporting farmers who are using organic or regenerative or restorative practices, but don't have funds for certification? So, Michael, did I capture that correctly? Well, I guess I read it. Did you want to add anything to that before Gautam responds?
I guess what I'm getting at is, there's like a resource issue in part for buyers, particularly, we're a small grocery, and so like our resources to sort of interact with, it's easier when it's a farmer here in Oregon, say, like we can go check them out or get information. It's a bit harder when it's overseas. So, and of course, like our customers to some degree can understand if we educate them a little on, like, this person doesn't have the resources to get organic certification, but use organic practices. Like that's a hurdle, but it seems to some degree like a surmountable one. But yeah, I don't know if there are like ways for buyers in similar stores and companies to like reach those farmers who don't have the resources to get the certification, right? Because it's easy to just see the certification and like there's certain like baseline that about, but maybe we don't have the resources. And then also if you have ideas about kind of how to spread the word for those people, like with our customer base to educate, I'd be interested in that too.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that made sense. Sorry, it's a lot.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Raj, I think with your exposure to the market side of things and your work with farmers in Uttarakhand and working with our organization, would you like to take this question? I think
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, and I do view that as one of the roles of groups like ours, to provide that transparency, to bridge that gap, Michael, that you're speaking of. Not being able to visit a tea farmer on the other side of the world is an understandably large barrier to verifying sort of.
Much as I'd like to.
Yes, and as much as we'd like you to come with us too.
Maybe one day.
Yeah. But yeah, that is something that we attempt to do in our work. And I know many other companies, including Nishis, do it as well, is to provide the transparency necessary for a buyer to feel comfortable that, all right, although there might not be the certifications that certainly consumers, for good reason, trust as validation, can companies like ours play a role in providing an alternative to that? So there's still an assurance of, the ethics or the sustainability behind the supply chain. And yet there's also, an acknowledgement that the administrative lift for a lot of farmer groups is beyond what is reasonable for right now. So I guess that does rely to a large degree then on the trust that, you know, ABAYA would put on a company like ours. And hopefully, I guess the way I've approached it is that just by being publicly accountable for what we say keeps the pressure on us to stay honest and true. I guess that was my initial thought and response, but Gautam, if you wanted to add, please do.
No, I think you've covered that, Raj. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Michael, and I'm looking forward to more conversation on that topic because it's a thorny one. And I appreciate that we're able to get into the thorns a little bit in this one, but certainly figuring out the right way to give everybody what they need to feel comfortable is a challenge that I'm excited to be working with Gautam and everybody to figure out how to address. David, did you have another question?
Yeah, and it's about all of these things that we're talking about. So for context, what I do is I teach people about tea who don't have direct access to, you know, producers and sort of tea cultures of origin also. I primarily focus on Chinese and Taiwanese teas. So I know a little bit more about kind of certification issues in those tea cultures and industries. You know, China, of course, has some problems with kind of like counterfeit certifications. So one of the things that Western consumers, especially people who aren't especially familiar with tea, always ask about is organic certification. And I try to explain essentially what everybody has just been saying, that like there are a lot of cases in which either the certification is somewhat meaningless or the lack of certification is completely meaningless because it's just a matter of the farm not having the resources, you know, be it financial or educational or whatever, to maintain that certification. And it seems like people are starting to understand that to a certain extent. And what I usually direct people to do as kind of counterweight to relying on the certifications is to get as close as possible to the producers. So, you know, if you're buying from Fred Meyer, which is just like a big chain supermarket or something, you're essentially as far as you can be from the producer. And so you have to rely almost entirely on something like a certification for that information. Whereas if you're buying from Raj, you're able to rely on him for a lot more granular and rich information than what would be provided by just a certification. And I thought it was super interesting that you saw the larger kind of like, I don't know, almost society level, systemic level problem with these certifications as like partially kind of a socialist problem. Because what I see on our end is kind of the capitalist problem of having all of these interactions be transactional. So there isn't actually a relationship with the producer. It's a relationship with just, oh, did we lose you? Oh, there you are. Like just strictly the product. So there's no actual exchange of information between the, you know, for lack of a better word, consumer and the person who is actually involved in creating the tea. And I know that some groups are, some of the certifications for other, you know, not the organic sphere specifically, but other sort of like more kind of social good type certifications are trying to set it up in a much more bottom-up way do you think there's like any comparable thing happening in organic where like organic or related practices, you know, maybe better than organic, maybe regenerative, where there is that sort of like not only maybe peer review, but actually like collaborating with the producers to actually be part of the standard setting body? Because it seems like that would kind of be, I don't know, maybe the only real solution if we're going to be working within this sort of like transactional thing to begin with.
Yeah, Gautam, and thank you, David. And Gautam, recognizing that you're still like in the process right now of going through the regenerative certification, I would be curious if you can speak to sort of the balancing of a participatory informed approach that seems to underlie the way TPI's gardens are organized, with the aspirations of the regenerative movement around incorporating that, and sort of what your experience has been thus far in actually going through the process. Was that it? David, is that a fair continuation of your question?
Yeah, it totally does. And I was also curious, just, you know, because I'm not super familiar with the like on the ground stuff in areas outside of Taiwan and China. I'd be really curious to hear you and anyone else on the call who's a producer to talk about like how much of a problem it is sort of proportionately in the areas you're super familiar with, of the sort of like people who shouldn't be getting certified are getting certified or are somehow like faking a certification, versus people who are not certified but, you know, really should be. I don't know if you really have a sense of like the ratios of that sort of thing, but if you do, it would help in terms of like teaching consumers what they're actually getting with an organic certification.
Mm-hmm. So David, you've packed it a lot, but I'll try my best to answer.
Sorry about that.
Great inputs there. It's enriching for me as well. So okay, you know, I think the big goal here is, you know, you want certifications to be an enabler. Okay, you don't want and to be a source of legitimacy, especially when, you know, that farmer's picture, you know, is a big question mark. You don't know who the farmer is, where the produce is coming from. So yeah, you know, you see the label and you know that's a great sense of relief, a source of legitimacy, right? But you know what you absolutely don't want your farmers, you know, across the world to do is to get bogged down with paperwork where they don't have enough time to attend to their farms, and that's what's happening right now. So you know, when I meant with like the socialist bent that these standards are taking, you know, what I really meant is, if you look, most of these standards and these bodies that are creating these standards, they're largely European, right? And there's a great deal of goodness in these standards, you know, where there's a genuine effort to improve livelihoods, improve the nature, preserve the nature around you, conserve the water, the soil that's below us. But I think, you know, why it becomes highly bureaucratic and socialist is the detailing, you know, that they entail. So you'll have standards that will tell you how every plucker's house should look, what should be the amount of ventilation, how much space to have for them to wash their clothes, you know. And that's the socialist, you know, like it's almost like you know, a communist book that you're reading, like, you know, these are the blocks of homes and this is how the layout of the tea garden should be. And you know, instead of playing the enabling role where, you know, the issues in these parts of the world aren't like the lack of physical amenities or infrastructure anymore. They're more about, you know, the issues relating to, say, power relations between communities, you know, gender equality, uh, uh, the quality of education and the quality of awareness that people have key aspects of life, right from health to the sense of belonging that they should have towards their own, uh, the sense of keeping the family together, how do you limit that machismo culture. And I think that's where these standards are failing, because what they're trying to address aren't actually not always, but increasingly now I'm seeing in most cases aren't actually any more relevant. So where is that right balance? You absolutely need a certificate. I think the story that you have farmers without certificates. While there'll be many genuine farmers who just don't have that resource to own a certificate, I think there is this overriding concern that David mentioned, where there are far too many farmers trying to earn a quick buck. Organic produce does fetch you a higher price, and there are many that would try selling their produce as organic when they actually aren't organic. So you absolutely need a label, in the true sense of environmental label, like an organic label or a fair label under the social part of things. Now, the participatory approach, right? And where is the producer's voice? Is it being heard? And you're right. I think we've seen that with the structure that regenerative farming offers. We are seeing that with some labels. For example, the biodynamic movement, which is again, it's a movement that really came out from Rudolf Steiner's philosophy on lunar movements and the energy beneath our soil. They have started giving ownership, and they've completely decentralized their working style, where every country has a Demeter biodynamic office, and for example, in this certificate, again, just to get into a little bit of the granularity part of it, right? The cow is central to all their philosophies and work, right? Now some of the preparations under biodynamic required us to use cow horns. This is in a country that worships the cow, so how do you exactly find horns of dead cows, right? And that's where the context setting came. Once they had a India office, they could replace those preparations that required a cow horn with a similar yet different substitute. So evolving powers, making it more decentralized, some of these movements, and also having more and more producer voices at the decision-making level. I'll share a personal example and I'll keep it short. My father was in the board of Fairtrade, which was FLO, the Fair Trade Organization in Europe. And when it came to voting, he always told me that the producers were always at a minority, so you could never really get the producer's voice heard. So I think that's where you really need an organization that truly all the stakeholders that are part of these ecosystems.
Oof, that was good. Power to the people, Gautam. Thanks for doing what you're doing. Okay, I recognize that we're getting a little late into the evening for you. It's past 11. So maybe we can do one or two more questions, and then we can move towards wrapping up this conversation. We do have one from Rob. Sorry.
Murthy, I'm just checking to see if you have missed it out or.
I'm sorry.
There was a question by a person called PP Murthy.
Oh, yeah, that's my mother. Hey, Mama. Did I miss one? I apologize. Oh, yes. Yeah, Mom, do you want to come up and share your question?
Most important question of the evening for you, Raj.
Yes. The role of women, especially professionalization and upward mobility of women. Mom, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. 1 second. Let me close this door. So. Okay, so women's issues are always a big issue for me. And with Adiraj, I've been to some of the tea farms, and I know that women do really a lot of work, a lot of the hard work from morning till evening. And most of the ones I see are the low level, that is plucking leaves, right? So um, I'm thinking, I'm hopeful that even though many of the women start at that over a period of time, there I'm sure some really smart women who are able to do much more than that and are able to rise beyond that level to a more professional level of being the overseer or even maybe management level or any, and I understand that many of them don't have much education. So what I just want to hear what is done to be able to pick out those diamonds in the rough, those women who you see have a lot of potential that needs to be cultivated, and that would really impact other women as a role model as well as women themselves. And if you can share some examples where you have been able to take somebody like that and bring them to a level where we can all be proud of. So that's where I was coming from.
That's such a, yeah, I mean, you're right. You're very, out of, so 90% of our, tea pluckers are women, right? And, in the classic development paradigm, what you often see is that the men folk are the ones who migrate and the women stay back. So they really are backbone, and our focus, especially my wife Ashwini, who works with me, our focus really has been on this backbone. From our end, I think, first identifying the problems that women face in these parts of India, important. So say, in Northeast, you have some cases of domestic violence still that persist. You have child marriages, so teenage marriages where girls are married between the ages of 16 and above, 17 and above. Child pregnancies, very poor personal hygiene standards due to often connected to the social stigma that's attached to issues like they talk about, say, even something simple like menstruation. It's a huge stigma in Darjeeling and Nepal. So we've really tried to deeply understand some of these issues. Down south, it's more to do with in the southern part of India with alcoholism. There's a strong machismo culture down south that prevents women from really taking leadership roles and then really holding that power. And yeah, this is that very stereotypical picture that you see in every tea garden. You have the tea pluckers who are women, and then the supervisors who are men. So I think for a very long time, what we have tried to do is put women in these leadership roles. So within Darjeeling, there have only been 2 women managers ever, and I'm very proud to tell you that both have been from tea promoters. One has retired, one is still working with us. She's the manager of Samabyong Tea Estate. Uh, and then the small steps, right? Over the last couple of years, with the banking system in India becoming more and more developed, we have made every women tea plucker of ours a bank account, so that the money can be transferred under her name. And in the olden days, which was just even a couple of years ago, you would have this lady plucker take the money and go give it to her husband, who would, that cliche, right? Who would go spend it on alcohol or other less productive avenues of investment. So yeah, opening bank accounts we have seen has given them a great voice and greater control for their savings. my wife has Ashwin, she's here today in the call. She for the last few years has been really championing this cause of female hygiene, especially on menstruation is such a taboo in Darjeeling. So we tied up with a specialized agency from the western part of India who was focusing on this exact issue. So first removing the stigma, and then they supplied us with these reusable pads, which was amazing and something new for these women. And we have continued that project now for the last 5 years. And every year she comes down, and she gets all these
Nice.
creates this calming that's the healthy space, and she ensures that there are enough male representatives as well, because every man has a wife or a mother, or in some cases a daughter. So yeah, there's some of the small instances, but we have a long way to go. Long way to go.
Right. So thank you. My question was to just raise the issue and ask you to take care of the women who work on your tea estates. And I'm really glad to hear that that your wife is joining you in a number of these. And before I stop, I want to just say that it's always much more effective if you have fathers of girls participating in these decisions and changing some of these, because when fathers have daughters, suddenly their concern is at a heightened level. That's my experience. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thanks. And as a transition, I'll also offer that the Samabyong estate that Gautam mentioned, I tried to spell the name in the chat. Gautam, please correct it if I think I put that.
That's correct. That's
okay,
correct.
yes, great. Yeah, and we're very proud to source our Darjeeling autumnal tea from that garden. And would you actually maybe just touch on the Subarna Samabyong relationship that is a collaboration that results in this tea as an example of kind of all the things we've talked about so far?
Yeah. Samabyong is, one of those real success stories that we have had in Tea Promoters India. This was an abandoned tea garden. They used to sell handmade teas to Tibet, which is, the close to the India-China border. And then India and China had a war in 1962, and that border got shut. And the local economy that survived on selling this handmade tea to China literally collapsed. That's when they invited us to work with them and restart the tea garden, which we did. And the tea garden today is called Samabyong. It's one of, if not the highest tea garden in Darjeeling. With its elevation, the flavors are highly pronounced. The growth is slow, making the Darjeeling cups that one drinks from this tea estate very deep in its flavor profile. We have Bhavna working there. She's the only lady manager, and she's really won that spot on merit. And because Samabyong is so remote, close to the border with China, we always could see the real length and breadth of the sheer potential that we had in creating an impact for this remote region. So in the initial years, the first demand of the community was that, hey, we want a school here. We don't want our children to really go through the hardships that we have gone through. So we started the BM High School, which is the Bridgemohan High School. Bridgemohan was my grandfather's name, and the school still runs today. But then to really increase that sphere of influence and impact, what we did was we started engaging with these remote communities almost 2 hours away from the closest road, so by walk, who were just about managing their lives by growing cash crops like cashew, cinnamon, cardamom, and broomstick. The problem with these cash crops really, Raj, is that they're seasonal, And often when the harvesting time comes, you see that the trader who buys from these farmers reduces the price. So they really don't get that bang for their buck. So we went in explaining to them that look, if you grow tea, this will be a fixed asset, because you can a tea bush survives for 100 years, and it gives you a steady income every week. And as I mentioned earlier, farmers initially are very skeptical. So they said, but you're the guy who, with Sama Byong, you guys have the processing unit, we don't. So if we grow tea, we'll be dependent on you. And I still remember my father telling them that, yeah, but you'll have to trust us. You're right. You'll be dependent on us, and that's how it will be. But you'll have to trust us, and that's how life is. So when the first day when they sent us their tea leaves, I remember they sent it on horseback, and the entire logistics hadn't really been worked out. And I still remember that the tea leaves had been literally soaked in the horse's sweat, and they were smelly.
There's a market for that.
People had to buy it to maintain that trust, that we wanted to them to feel that they could have with us. And now over the years, we have a very smooth, efficient logistic chain worked out. They're still very remote. They still don't have a road. So when someone falls sick up there, they carried on head back. But they make great teas, and they're organic certified. They maintain their own certification, which makes me very happy, seeing how far they've come. And that's the TU by Raj.
Well, I didn't know that full backstory on it, so I'm very glad for these additional details. And we'll figure out what to do with the horsesweat piece. But to say just generally, yeah, doing that work of connecting, communities that aren't even road accessible into a global market is quite a connection. It's incredible to think how much is in every single cup of tea that we drink. Just the story that it tells all the way back. Okay, I think we should probably maybe, if Gautam, if you have the bandwidth for one last question, we'll touch that and then bid you adieu for the night. And Rob had asked generally about climate change. I'll read the question. Can you share any thoughts you may have on ways tea gardens can and are being designed and improved climate health and carbon storage? Also, as a consumer, is there any way for me to understand via certification or otherwise what is being done on this topic at the farm level? So the climate sort of adaptations that you're all introducing. Is that right, Rob?
It is, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, specifically, thinking about land use as a very important topic within climate change that I know many are growing more and more aware of, and thinking about really, the best from a climate perspective, best use of land is having very dense forests to keep carbon trapped in all of the plants that are grown in a densely compact area. And I know, as I've researched a bit into coffee and chocolate, I know there are certifications there for shade grown and bird friendly, which often tell you a little bit about some of the overgrowth above the layers at which those products are being grown that can be very beneficial from a climate perspective. I'm not aware of anything like that in tea, and I was hoping that you might be able to share some thoughts there.
Yeah, no, that's a really serious issue that we're facing every day now, Rob. The changing weather patterns. I'll give you a great example of now where we are with the harvesting season. So usually my grandfather would always tell me that 15th of January it rains, and 15th of February is when the harvest starts. Through the winter months it's dry, and you need that rain in the in the beginning of the year in January. We haven't had that since I've joined Tea Promoters. So that means you have 4 to 5 months of complete dryness. It doesn't rain till it's more or less April. And that eats up into half our harvesting season, and this is what we call first flush in Darjeeling and Assam. So it's a very important part of the harvesting year. These are the changes in weather patterns that you see. It's not only the dryness. We had torrential downpours in the month of October, which is absolutely unseasonal. The monsoons are usually they culminate by September. They're long gone by October. So we're seeing this. I think everyone's feeling it around the world, and I think COVID has made us realize that we all are vulnerable, and climate change could also be real. So what are we doing in our tea gardens and systems suited towards really gearing up for climate change? I think one of the greatest pollutants that all of us, and us included, are guilty of using is coal. Most tea gardens across the world, if not all, either use firewood or coal in their drying units when they dry the tea. And that's where I see the let's just say the hypocrisy of organic standards, where you look at the soil, you look at so many other things, but you're really not looking at your footprint, and you need another standard to look at that, which is ridiculous. So we've been cognizant of that. One of the changes that we have made to art incrementally, we haven't done it in all, where it's expensive. So out of 10 units, we have already shifted to gas in 5 units, natural liquefied gas, which is a cleaner energy use. This year in our Assam garden, we have switched completely to solar lighting.
Oh, wow.
And this was again an absolutely strictly, of course, sustainability at its core, but strictly a business decision. Solar was proving to be cheaper than coal, oil, with all the global turmoil that you're seeing. And I think that's where I would want Tea Promoters India to really start now in the next few years. Going towards where we can not only have cleaner supply chains and operations, but also have the communities that live within our tea farms adopt these clean measures. So as of now, all our small farmer co-ops and villages that live within the tea gardens have solar lighting. That's an effort, an initiative that we took, because we knew that these regions are so remote that the government would never possibly reach these areas with street lighting in the next 50 years. So we spend that money. But there's so much more you can do. There's absolutely so much more you can do in making sure that not only just us, but even the communities that live with us adopt this change towards renewables. And then on carbon sequestration, I think that's what you meant. How can we conserve the carbon within the soil? I think plant more trees. It's amazing. The simple idea of just planting more trees and the impact that creates, not only for the carbon that it holds within the soil, but also in terms of conserving a topsoil, in terms of creating a beneficial microclimate within your tea farm, and attracting birds, which is so important. They play a huge role for us in terms of keeping our pests under control. So. Yes.
Well, thanks. I feel like this conversation is just a warm up for more to be had. So with that, I'm going to remove the spotlight from Gautam so we can all come together as a group. And please, if you would, thank you all for joining, and please join me in thanking Gautam for joining us on this conversation, and for a wonderful Sunday evening talk for him, Sunday morning for all of us. Just to reiterate, we do have 2 teas from Gautam's team at TPI, which is our Assam Black and our Darjeeling Autumnal, and you can get them both for 15% off through the 26th using the discount code that I'm going to drop in the chat right now. But beyond that, yeah, thank you for caring about these issues and for this conversation. It does seem like, progress happens through conversation. And I hope this is one of many that will help to shift a larger narrative that we're all connected to in a more positive direction. So with that, thank you all. I'll hang on the phone, and if you want to stick around for a little while, I'm happy to keep chatting and drinking tea, but otherwise we'll call it a day. One last thing, we are planning to do these conversations quarterly, and we're thinking we might, this was kind of coincidental that it was on the equinox, but we're thinking we'll just stick to that cycle. And so maybe summer solstice or the Sunday closest to it is when we'll have our next one. So until then, steep on and cheers. Thank you all. And thank you, Gautam, for joining.
Thanks, guys. It was a real pleasure. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Sleep well.
That was really awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, I feel like it was just like, all of these conversations could go so much deeper in every direction.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thanks both for engaging and sort of being on, contributing. It's more interesting when it's not just talking heads.
Yeah, it was more a matter of like reining myself in as opposed to not being able to.
David, I love the last thing that you posted about how can we kind of like, people who are interested, because this is such an important topic as producers and kind of some, consumers and just people bridging all of that gap to really stay connected to discuss these topics. And I Raj, I don't remember when did we have these conversations, because we get into like